Charles Cullen pled guilty to killing 13 patients, but is suspected of killing hundreds of more. Now, this begs the question, how does somebody end up like this? Along with focusing on his crimes, we're going to explore his psychology behind his formative years and examine the age-old question, was he born a killer, or was he made into one? Welcome to Mind of a Killer. I'm your host, Anneliese Chase, and in today's episode, we're diving into the early life of Charles Cullen, who headlines have dubbed the Angel of Death, one of the most notorious serial killers in history. In this three-part series, we will dive into, the mind of a killer. We will go over the crimes and the psychology behind these killers. Charles Edmund Cullen was one of the most notorious serial killers in American history. Who was a former nurse, he confessed to killing at least 29 patients over a 16-year career, even though experts believe that the true number could be much higher. His crimes raised serious concerns about medical oversight and hospital regulations. We will delve into his life, the crimes, the investigation, and the everlasting impact of his actions. Cullen was born on February 22, 1960, in West Orange, New Jersey, as the youngest of 8 children in a working-class family. His childhood was marked by instability, neglect, and tragedy. His father, a bus driver, passed away when Cullen was only 7 years old, leaving his mother to raise 8 children alone under financial strained conditions. The loss of his father at such an early age meant that Cullen never had a strong male role in his life, contributing to the feeling of abandonment and insecurity. Cullen described his upbringing as very difficult, with his family struggling to make ends meet. He was often left to fend for himself in a chaotic household where individual attention was very scarce. He was introverted and socially awkward, making him a very easy target for bullies at school. Peers often ridiculed him for his frail appearance and quiet demeanor, which further isolated him from social circles. Joe Rodriguez, who graduated from Bedfordshire University with a degree in psychology, was interviewed about Charles Cullen. During the interview, she stated,
"He tried to commit suicide for the first time, according to the records, when he was 9 years old by drinking chemicals, which really says a lot about where his mindset was from a really young age."
From an early age, Cullen exhibited disturbing behavior. He was obsessed with death and suffered from serious psychological distress. His first known suicide attempt occurred at just 9 years old when he ingested chemicals from a chemistry set in an effort to end his life. This was the first of many attempts, signaling deeper emotional turmoil and mental instability that would continue into adulthood. Joe Rodriguez also stated,
"Most people who are psychopaths or sociopaths have very troubled childhoods, suffer with mental health problems for their whole life, and don't really have stable relationships."
His greatest emotional attachment was to his mother, a dedicated yet overworked woman who provided him with what little stability he had. However, tragedy struck when she died in a car accident while he was still a teenager. This event shattered Cullen, sending him deeper into a spiral of depression and loneliness. Adding to his distress, hospital staff cremated his mother's body without his consent, denying him the opportunity to say his final goodbye. This perceived betrayal by the medical system left a lasting impact on him, possibly fueling his later actions in the hospital. Academically, Cullen struggled through his school years. His grades were poor and he lacked direction. Seeking an escape from his troubled home life, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy in 1978, hoping to find structure and belonging. Cullen's time in the Navy was turbulent and only worsened his mental health issues. He was assigned to USS Woodrow Wilson, which was a ballistic missile submarine, where he worked as a petty officer responsible for operating the missile control panel. The highly structured and demanding military environment proved to be overwhelming for him. He struggled with authority and discipline, to which he often isolated himself from his fellow sailors. Cullen was subject to relentless bullying and hazing from his crewmates, who found his withdrawn and eccentric behavior unsettling. He became the target of cruel pranks, which further deepened his alienation. He attempted suicide multiple times while serving in the Navy, including one incident in which he consumed a toxic mixture of chemicals in a desperate attempt to end his life. These actions raised concerns among his superiors, who saw him mentally unfit for service. His most infamous act during this time in the military was an unsettling episode. He was discovered in the submarine's missile control room. He was dressed in a surgical gown and mask, seemingly lost in his own world. This bizarre behavior alarmed his commanders, who quickly removed him from missile duty and reassigned him to a less critical role. His erratic actions in multiple suicide attempts ultimately led to his discharge from the Navy in 1984. Though officially classified as an honorable discharge, it was clear that Cullen was pushed out due to his concerns over his mental stability. Despite these personal struggles, Cullen decided to enter the field of nursing, graduating from Mountainside Hospital School of Nursing in 1986. His decision to become a nurse may have stemmed from his desire to exert control over life and death, a theme that would be later defined in his crimes. The field of nursing provided him access to vulnerable patients and an opportunity to act out dark impulses under the guise of care. Cullen worked at numerous hospitals across New Jersey and Pennsylvania, often leaving jobs abruptly under suspicious circumstances. Colleagues often found him quiet and introverted, though some noticed erratic and disturbing behavior. Over his 16-year career, he moved through at least 8 different medical facilities. Author Charles Graeber interviewed Cullen more than a dozen times for his book. This is what he said about how Cullen was able to bypass background checks at the hospital.
Charlie Cullen looked good. By the end of his career, he was a 16-year veteran. He had recommendations. And for a hospital to ask too much or say too much became a liability. You can't penalize a nurse for seeking counseling, for seeking treatment, for going to a rehab center successfully. And so, because of that, Charlie hid in those shadows.
During this time, Charles Cullen and Adrienne Taub got married in 1987 and had 2 daughters. However, their marriage was troubled from the start, largely due to Cullen's erratic behavior, emotional instability, and controlling tendencies. Adrienne eventually filed for divorce in 1993, citing concerns about Cullen's mental state and his dangerous behavior. In legal documents, she accused him of cruelty, erratic mood swings, and even harming their pets. She also claimed that he had spiked people's drinks with lighter fluid and exhibiting disturbing behavior around their children. The divorce and the subsequent custody battle further destabilized Cullen's already fragile mental state. His personal failures combined with ongoing psychological issues and work-related stress may have contributed to his eventual killing spree. Charles Graeber also stated in an interview,
He was feeling depressed. If his love life was in the toilet, he could poison patients. He could save patients. He could make decisions. He had an arena in which he mattered and where his actions had definite consequence.
His first known murders occurred at St. Barnabas Medical Center in Livingston, New Jersey in 1988. Suspicious patient deaths followed Cullen from hospital to hospital, yet he continued to secure new employment because hospitals failed to report their concerns due to liability fears and insufficient regulatory oversight. This is what Cullen stated in an interview after being caught at St. Barnabas.
That if you resign, we'll give you neutral references. And I decided to go with that.
Hospitals preferred to dismiss him quietly rather than investigating deeply or report their suspicions to law enforcement. This lack of oversight enabled him to continue killing. At another hospital, Charles Graeber also stated,
If you talk to the investigators there, they'll tell you, Cullen was our man, we knew he was dirty. They couldn't prove anything. It's all circumstantial.
Cullen's method of murder was very insidious. He administered lethal doses of the medication called DEDOXIN and insulin to his victims. These drugs, when administered improperly, can cause fatal heart conditions. DEDOXIN, for example, is a heart medication that in high doses can cause the patient's heart to stop. Because these drugs were often prescribed to critically ill patients, their deaths initially seemed natural. Cullen typically targeted elderly or severely ill patients, believing that he was ending their suffering. However, there are some victims who are on the path of recovery, raising questions about his true motives. Investigators and psychologists later speculated that his actions were driven more by a desire for control than any misguided sense of mercy. Cullen stated in an interview,
"In a sense, I thought I was helping."
Over the years, Cullen's confidence only grew. He became increasingly reckless with his killings. He manipulated hospital medication systems, taking advantage of their lax controls. Some hospitals used automatic dispensing systems, which recorded drug withdrawals automatically. Cullen would bypass the system by inputting a different medication from the same drawer, like Tylenol, and pick up DEDOXIN instead. However, because these systems were poorly monitored, Cullen was able to bypass this detection for years. Cullen was caught due to a combination of hospital suspicion, computerized medication tracking, and the effort of a fellow nurse. At Somerset Medical Center in New Jersey, where he killed 13 people in 13 months. This all was set into play after a priest named Reverend Gall died unexpectedly, who was recovering from pneumonia. Autopsy found high levels of DEDOXIN in his system. This was the second overdose within 14 days. This set off some red flags. Stephen Marcus, who is the head of poison control in New Jersey, stated during an interview,
"My number 1, 2, and 3 thought was that there was something malicious going on in the institution."
A fellow nurse called into poison control asking if any Korean herbs or mushrooms would cause this high level of DEDOXIN. This nurse thought this was just a simple error. They refused to believe that there was a fellow nurse on their floor trying to murder their patients. The head of poison control thought this was very suspicious and ended up contacting authorities. Authorities began to build a rapport against Cullen, but at first, hospital directors refused to comment and believed that he was not a suspect at the time. Investigators finally got a warrant to go through their medication dispense system. At first, the hospital told investigators that their system only kept logs up to 30 days, to which that was simply not true. Investigators finally started to get enough evidence against Cullen, but now they just needed a confession. This is where Amy Larhan comes into play. Amy worked with Cullen and was his best friend at the hospital. Since she was close with Cullen, police investigators believed that she was the best bet to get Cullen to confess. When the investigators first asked Amy for their help, she obviously did not believe it at first until they presented her with the amount of evidence that he had. After seeing the evidence, she worked with law enforcement to try to get Cullen to confess. She worked with law enforcement and wore a wire to gather evidence while talking to Cullen. During the meeting, Cullen said to Amy,
He said, "I want to go down fighting."
After Amy was able to get a confession out of Cullen, investigators confronted Cullen with these discrepancies in the medical records. Under pressure, he confessed to multiple murders, leading to his arrest in December 2003. Cullen's trial was one of the most shocking in recent criminal history. In 2006, he pleaded guilty to multiple counts of murder and attempted murder in both New Jersey and Pennsylvania. As part of his plea deal, he agreed to cooperate with investigators and provide details about his crimes. His courtroom behavior was erratic. He often appeared indifferent and unemotional as the charges were read against him. During the sentencing hearing, the family members of his victims were given an opportunity to speak, expressing their grief and outrage. At one point, Cullen disrupted proceedings by repeating, "Your Honor, you need to step down," over and over again, leading to his courtroom removal. His outburst only reinforced the perception that he was a deeply disturbed individual with little remorse for his actions. The judge sentenced Cullen to 11 consecutive life terms, ensuring that he would never be released from prison. He was ordered to serve at least 397 years behind bars, effectively sealing his fate. Cullen remains incarcerated at New Jersey State Prison, where he is serving out his sentence without the possibility of parole. As we revisit the nature versus nurture debate, the question still remains: was Charles Cullen destined to become a killer due to his biological and psychological makeup, or did his environment mold him into one? His life story suggests a combination of both elements. Genetic predisposition to mental illness coupled with a traumatic childhood and societal neglect likely contributed to his violent path. The age-old debate of nature versus nurture seeks to determine which either genetics nature or environmental influencers nurture play more of a significant role into shaping an individual's behavior. In the case of Charles Cullen, one of the primary arguments for the nature side of this debate is that certain individuals are born with genetic predispositions that make them more likely to engage with criminal behavior. Psychologists and criminologists have long studied the potential hereditary aspects of psychopathy, antisocial personality disorder, and other mental illnesses that contribute to violent tendencies. In Cullen's case, signs of mental instability appears early on in his life. From childhood, he exhibited extreme social withdrawal, depression, and suicidal tendencies. His first known suicide attempt only occurred at the age of 9, a rare and alarming sign of severe psychological distress. This could suggest that he was predisposed to mood disorders, such as depression or even a personality disorder that made emotional regulation difficult. Furthermore, Cullen's later actions align with traits commonly found in individuals with antisocial personality disorder, including a lack of empathy, manipulation, and disregard for human life. Some researchers argue that a certain brain structure, such as the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, play a role on how individuals process emotions and control impulses, suggesting that Cullen's behavior may have a neurological bias. Joe Rodriguez states,
when he's in control of it, yeah. So he enjoyed the fact that he was in that situation. It was all about him. And he was switching off to the things that people were saying because he didn't want other people to be able to see him in a way that he wasn't willing to portray himself as.
There is also speculation that Cullen may have exhibited traits of schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder, which could explain the dissociative behavior and hallucination-like tendencies. His erratic conduct, particularly during his military service and then later employment in hospitals, suggests an individual struggling with severe internal conflict. However, genetic predisposition alone does not create a serial killer. Many individuals with similar psychological conditions do not resort to violence. This is where environmental factors or nurture comes into play. Joe Rodriguez states,
because of all the warning signs, it's not to say that people who have mental health problems or people who have been suicidal throughout their lives can't be caring and can't step into that role. But for him, it was something slightly different.
While Cullen may have had a genetic predisposition to mental illness, his environment undoubtedly played a critical role in shaping his actions. He grew up in a chaotic household as the youngest of 8 children. His father died when he was just 7 months old, leaving his overworked mother to raise a huge family alone. The lack of parental attention and support likely contributed to his early emotional struggles. Adding to his instability, Cullen was frequently bullied at school. His frail appearance and introverted nature made him a very easy target for his peers. Social isolation and rejection during childhood are well-documented factors for later antisocial and violent behavior. Cullen's inability to form stable social relationships likely deepened his resentment towards others and fueled his sense of powerlessness. The most significant turning point in Cullen's early life was the tragic death of his mother in a car accident. Her sudden loss devastated him, and the hospital's decision to cremate her body without his consent left him feeling very betrayed. This moment may have instilled a deep-seated mistrust of the medical system, a system that he would later exploit to commit his crimes. Without a strong support system to help him cope with grief, Cullen's mental health deteriorated further, pushing him closer to the edge. In an attempt to escape his troubling past, Cullen joined the U.S. Navy in 1978. However, his time in the military only exacerbated his psychological issues. The rigid structure and harsh environment of the Navy proved to be too much for him to handle. He faced relentless bullying from his fellow sailors, further reinforcing his feelings of isolation and inadequacy. His strange behavior in the Navy, such as being found in the missile control room dressed in a surgical gown, led him to his removal from sensitive duties. Multiple suicide attempts during his service indicated that he was mentally unwell. Although he received an honorable discharge, his time in the Navy left him feeling more psychologically unstable than before. If Cullen had received proper psychological intervention at this stage, his later crimes may have been prevented. After leaving the military, Cullen pursued a career in nursing. The hospital environment provided him with both a sense of control and easy access to vulnerable victims. However, it also exposed him to repeated stress and rejection. He frequently changed jobs due to suspicion about his behavior, yet no hospital took a definitive action to stopping him. The lack of accountability in the medical field allowed Cullen to continue his killing spree undetected for years. This failure of institutional oversight played a significant role in his ability to commit murder repeatedly. Furthermore, Cullen's personal life was unstable. His marriage fell apart, he struggled with social relationships, repeatedly failing to connect with others. Cullen may have found a sense of power through his crimes. He was not only administering death, but he was also escaping from his personal struggles by exerting control over life itself. Joe Rodriguez states,
He is experiencing an awful lot of pain, and it's almost misplaced. He has no way of coping with it. His suicide attempts failed. And it's almost as though it's a way of him alleviating his pain by killing people.
Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, is a type of psychotherapy that helps individuals recognize and change negative patterns in thinking and behavior. It focuses on the connection between thoughts, feelings, and behavior, aiming to replace harmful or distorted thinking with healthier and more constructive alternatives. CBT is structured, goal-oriented, and typically short-term, and it's often used to treat mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, personality disorders, and trauma-related conditions. The therapy involves identifying problematic thought patterns, challenging their accuracy, and learning coping strategies and behavioral techniques to manage emotional distress. If Charles Cullen had received cognitive behavioral therapy early in his life, it might have helped address the serious, deep-rooted psychological issues that contributed to his violent actions. Cullen struggled with severe emotional instability, depression, and feelings of powerlessness, emotions that possibly drove him to assert control through murder. CBT would have provided him the tools to better manage these thoughts and emotions, helping him recognize the distorted thinking, like believing that he was helping his victims or that he had no other control in his life. With proper intervention and consistent therapy, it's possible that CBT could have redirected his behavior towards healthier coping mechanisms, potentially preventing the tragic outcome of his actions. Several psychological theories can be applied to Cullen's actions, further illustrating how nature and nurture intertwine in his development. Cullen's personal failures, his inability to form lasting relationships, his failed marriage, and his struggles with the military may have created more resentment that contributed to his violent behavior. Joe Rodriguez states,
So it's not for a sense of remorse, it's not for the patients, it's all about him. And because he believes that it's not his fault, it's everyone else's fault.
Could Cullen have been stopped? One of the most troubling aspects of Cullen's case is how easily he was able to continue his crimes despite all the warning signs. Hospitals failed to report the suspicious patient deaths, often opting to quietly dismiss him rather than launching investigations. This negligence highlights the failure of the healthcare system to properly vet medical professionals and address internal misconduct. Additionally, Cullen's mental health issues were ignored or inadequately treated. His multiple suicidal attempts, erratic behavior, and the clear signs of psychological distress could have led to early intervention. If he had received intensive psychiatric care, it would have been possible that his homicidal urges could have been addressed before he had the opportunity to act on them. Charles Cullen's case exemplifies how both nature and nurture contribute to criminal behavior. While he may have been predisposed to psychological instability, his environment played a crucial role in shaping him into a serial killer. His traumatic childhood, social rejection, and toxic work environments, and the system failures of the institutional around him all contributed to his eventual descent into murder. Understanding cases like Cullen's can help society develop a better mechanisms for identifying and preventing similar cases in the future. Improved mental health interventions, a stronger regulation oversight in the medical field, and a better institutional accountability could have all prevent individuals with Cullen's profile from harming others. Ultimately, the interplay between nature and nurture in shaping human behavior remains complex, but recognizing both factors is a key to preventing future tragedies. This case also raises the important discussions about mental health intervention. Could proper treatment and intervention have prevented him from becoming a serial killer? How can we as a society identify and support individuals who are struggling before it's too late? These are crucial questions to consider as we work to improve our understanding of criminal psychology and the system that allows such individuals to slip through the cracks. Next episode, I'll be talking about Aline Wuornos, who lived a similar life to Charles Cullen. Charles and Aline lived vastly different lives on the surface, but they shared a key similarities in rooted trauma and psychological instability that ultimately led them in their roles as serial killers. Both experienced deeply troubled childhoods marked by abuse, neglect, and emotional hardship. Charles endured bullying and the early death of his mother, while Aline faced abandonment, sexual abuse, and homelessness from a very young age. These early traumas likely contributed to their mental health struggles and distorted worldviews. Despite working in vastly different world environments, Cullen was a nurse and Wuornos was a sex worker. They both exploited their positions to commit murder, targeting vulnerable individuals. Ultimately, their lives reflect how unaddressed trauma and instability can manifest in violent, tragic ways. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you believe Charles Cullen was destined for darkness? Or could early intervention change his path? Thank you for tuning in, and make sure to join us next week as we explore Aline Wuornos, the Highway Killer.